So today we're diving into the story behind Holistically Well. As a mother, a doctor of physical therapy, a root cause practitioner who is very proactive about women's health care across the lifespan, this just felt like the next step in my journey as a private practice owner to get the word out more broadly. I cannot tell you the number of times that a woman has said, I wish I found you sooner. I wish I knew this information sooner. And honestly, looking back on my own health journey, it makes a lot of sense why I am providing this service for a more holistic, research-backed approach to women's healthcare today through my Holistically Well private practice. So we're going to dive into the story behind all of that today and what led to the creation of the Holistically Well method, my root cause approach to women's health. So looking back on my own health journey, I, in my teenage years, would get one menstrual cycle a year. So at 16, after this had been going on for 2 years, it began at age 14, between the end of state track season and the beginning of summer cross country season, I would get one cycle. That stayed consistent each year through high school. And at about age 16, my mom was like, we should look into this. This is not normal. We've given it 2 years to kind of normalize, which is what we should give a menstrual cycle after it begins. Give it about 2 years. And at that point, we should be seeing regularity. And I was not. My only regular was that it would come once a year. That was the pattern for me, which it should be between 20 and 32 days is a typical span of when we should have that menstrual cycle. So about once a month. And when we looked into it, the OBGYN's only option for me was to start birth control. She suggested that I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and told me that I likely would struggle to have children someday. Given that I did not have any other signs of PCOS outside of an irregular menstrual cycle. So some other symptoms that are typically associated with PCOS are acne, weight gain, facial hair growth, and insulin resistance. I didn't have any of those symptoms. Her nutritional advice was for me to put on weight. So I had a very low body fat percentage, so opposite of, what you typically might see in someone symptomatic with true PCOS, because I was very, very overactive. I was a 4-sport high school athlete at a small school, so we were able to participate in a lot of athletics, and my body was never getting a break. And her nutritional advice was for me to go to McDonald's and eat a burger and fries to beef me up. And my mom questioned everything. She wanted to get to the root cause of the issue and said, birth control, I don't think is the answer. She's not sexually active. And, as a provider, I now know that OBGYNs offer birth control for about 60% of patients for reasons that are not for actual birth control. That 60% of the time providers are subscribing or prescribing birth control to their patient for symptoms. And we both knew this was just a Band-Aid. It wouldn't give me real menstrual cycles that were imperative for my bone health. I was actually struggling with stress fractures with running. That was the recurrent injury that I would see. And now as a provider, I know that was a sign that my body just wasn't getting the nourishment it needed or the break that it needed, honestly, for my body to optimally support my bone health and have that fifth vital sign that is a menstrual cycle coming regularly to show that my body was well nourished and well supported. So my key takeaways from this experience as a teenager were that conventional medicine tends to offer this Band-Aid solution, like birth control, rather than addressing the root cause. And it was the first time in my life where I really had to be an advocate for my own health and to choose not to rely on this pharmaceutical Band-Aid that was birth control, and instead to understand that I was a high school athlete whose nervous system was clearly too stressed to allow my body to cycle regularly, but at the time, nobody explained it that way. And so this was that first journey into understanding a more holistic approach to women's health. We're going to jump ahead now to my college experience. So in college, I entered in, still only getting that one cycle a year, but now my body had a chance to take a break. I chose not to pursue collegiate athletics. I really wanted to focus on my career and learning all I could about optimizing human health. And so I studied exercise science and nutrition in undergraduate studies and learned about the female athlete triad, which means low energy availability. Essentially, we're not getting enough nutrient stores in for what we're putting out, menstrual irregularities, and low bone density. The light bulb went off. I was like, this is me. This is what I have. And I realized that those stress fractures in high school were linked to undernourishment and lack of a period. Again, this wasn't something I was doing on purpose. I wasn't trying to malnourish my body. It just simply wasn't getting the energy it stores that it needed for the amount of output that I had as a young athlete. And so in undergraduate, I was able to regulate my cycles simply by backing down on the amount of cardio that I was doing. So I still exercised about 6 days a week, but I found barre and Pilates and yoga, and it gave my nervous system this reset where 3 to 4 days a week, I was doing more calming, low impact exercise. And about 3 days a week, I was still running. I ran a full marathon. I ran multiple half marathons. So I was still extremely active, but I was sprinkling in these breaks every single week that allowed my body to feel safe enough to start menstruating. I also was intentional about the type of foods that I was putting into my body and making sure that I was eating enough for the amount that I was putting out. And these were all specific nuances that we learned in my studies as an exercise scientist. I then went on to get my doctorate in physical therapy from The Ohio State University. And upon graduating with that, my dream job was to work for Ohio State Sports Medicine. It is a fantastic department that treats a variety of endurance athletes, runners, triathletes, and even D1 collegiate athletes there at the university. And I started to become the go-to person for hip patients, specifically those who were also runners or endurance athletes. And I started to see a pattern. So many women coming in with hip pain, back pain, and knee issues were coming to us in sports medicine for these concerns. But when I started to peel back the curtain and ask them more deep diving questions, I began to understand that the underlying problems started during pregnancy or postpartum. Nobody seemed to ask them about what else went on during that time. Did you have a cesarean section birth? Did you have significant vaginal tearing during delivery? Has your scar tissue ever been worked on? Do you leak when you run? Most of them said yes to this leakage during running and no to ever being asked about their scar tissue when it came to C-section or vaginal tearing. And so I again linked this back to issues in my own health. And to be honest, I leaked every single cross-country race when I was in high school. I was told that that was normal, and that meant that I was running hard. That meant that I was giving it my all, and it was a very normal thing for a lot of the young ladies on our team to do. And again, this light bulb moment went off that there is more pieces to the puzzle than just looking at the orthopedic issue here. We need to look into the pelvic floor. And so I started centering my continuing education as a doctor of physical therapy around the pelvic floor and around root cause women's health, and how it's not only the muscles and the fascial connections and our strength that we're looking at, it's also the relaxation. It's our nervous system regulation. And it's our nutritional input, because that is literally the building blocks for these muscles to be able to respond the way we want and need them to not only prevent leakage, but to also stop those more orthopedic concerns of the hip pain, back pain, knee pain. Everything in the body works together as a whole, And that pelvic floor is often the missing link that a lot of providers just aren't asking about. Women also aren't referred out to pelvic floor physical therapy proactively, and something that we are needing to advocate for ourselves on. And so I had been a therapist at this point for a few years and hadn't even addressed my own pelvic floor concerns. So I was able to be my own first patient in that realm and was able to solve my leakage issues, again, run a half marathon without leakage. So now my cycles have been regular. Now I'm able to run without peeing my pants. And it just has become my mission to help other women do the same because I know that I'm not alone, right? So I launched my own private practice. I broke out of this siloed medical model where patients are put into boxes, right? So that hip pain patient coming to me, technically, I would need a separate referral to work on their leakage whenever I was within that traditional medical system. Or I would refer out to a pelvic floor physical therapist to see them in the pelvic floor silo of things. And then they could refer them back to me in sports medicine whenever they were ready to refocus on running. And so as a private practice owner who launched my own model of care, I'm able to look at the whole picture in-house, right? We can get back to your goal of running while addressing the hip pain and while addressing that leakage, all in one visit, all with one provider. And I know your story through and through versus having to explain your story to so many different providers for each different body part, right? So traditional medicine really ignores that full picture. It ignores that root cause of so many hip, back, and knee injuries in women and focuses instead on just that one body part. Becoming the lead of our hip outcome team at Ohio State and working with our hip preservation physicians really opened my eye to this linkage in the hip and the pelvic floor and how often the two are intertwined. And that by addressing the hip, oftentimes that pelvic floor can get better and vice versa. So again, we just really need to work in unison. So this highlights the fact that our medical system here in the United States is often very reactive instead of proactive, treating problems after they become severe instead of preventing them in the first place. Women are suffering for years or even decades before someone connects their pain from pregnancy, postpartum, or hormonal imbalances to what they're feeling now. And those are the pieces of the puzzle that I started to put together while in traditional medicine, and then had this vision of what if we address these concerns before they've even become a major issue. And that, my friend, is why I started Holistically Well. The traditional medical model just wasn't enough, right? I wanted to blend the sports medicine, pelvic health, and holistic care all within house. And so in 2022, I stepped out of the medical system to create a private practice that sees patients as whole people and not just individualized body parts. I initially launched everything under my own name, Dr. Kayla Borchers, and that's what you'll still see my website as and my Instagram account. But by the grace of God, all of this has expanded into growing a team to help women heal from the inside out. And so you'll see Holistically Well, and that's the title of my podcast, because I feel like it really encompasses everything that I stand for, that we want to look at the body from all angles, physically, nutritionally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and how all of that links together to form who you are and the issues that you're having too, right? Because if we're not pouring into all buckets in some way, then we are going to have missing links in how we feel as a whole. So Holistically Well stands for not just treating the symptoms, we get to the root cause. We prioritize proactive care over reactive medicine, and you'll see this really, really lays out, especially in preconception health, which we'll dive into in the next few episodes. Because seeing my own patients go through struggles when I was in sports medicine and that more reactive care model, it made me so passionate for my own health, again, my own story, right? being proactive in preconception, because I had been told at 16 I would struggle to have kids, right? So we're going to break that down here in the next several episodes, how to be proactive at preconception, and then really just continue along that journey into and through motherhood. Here at Holistically Well, we combine evidence-based science with a holistic and faith-aligned approach. So too often in that holistic world, you just see misinformation sprouting from influencers who had a personal experience, and then they take that N of one, or that research-based experience of one, and make it into writing, right? They use that as the framework for everything they share, under the essence that because it worked for me, it's going to work for you. And as a medical provider, I want you to know that everything you're going to learn from this podcast is going to be educational, evidence-based, and look at, again, the health from multiple angles and not just an N of one or a story of one, okay? So while I do have my own personal story and I will weave that in, I have stories and experiences with thousands of patients at this point who I have helped along their journey. And so I want you to keep that in mind, to know when you're just consuming information broadly that the polarizing topics get the most attention, right? And so to just take things with a grain of salt in terms of if somebody you're learning from is not a medical provider, does not have the education to back what they're standing for. And that's something that I take very seriously as a doctor of my field, as a doctor of physical therapy, as an exercise scientist, and as a prenatal and postpartum corrective exercise specialist, to make sure that I am sharing with you research-backed and evidence-based information that really integrates a holistic approach with modern medicine, because it does not need to be black and white. It does not need to be either or. There's a place for both. And here we kind of live in the gray, and we're going to find where you can connect with each option for it to best get to the root cause for your health concerns. Okay, so what's coming in future episodes? We will do deep dives into nervous system regulation, pelvic health, so that leakage with running, jumping, how do we solve that, right? Hormonal balance, so how did I regulate my cycles? What do I recommend for clients with different issues and experiences? And then also functional fitness. Motherhood is a sport. Lifting up those kiddos, chasing them around the park. I want you to be able to do all of that without pain and without leakage, and to proactively prepare your body for kiddos in the future if you're not there yet. You're going to hear about real-life patient stories and guest expert interviews on nutrition, holistic women's health, prenatal and postpartum wellness, reducing toxin load. Like, we are going to cover all aspects of holistic health for both you and your family on this podcast. If this episode resonated with you, if these topics get you excited, I want you to share this with a friend. That is how we are going to grow this podcast and grow this platform to give voice to holistic women's health concerns across the lifespan. And I truly do want to hear from you. What questions do you have? What topics do you want covered? Reach out to me at Dr. Kayla Borchers. Send me a DM and let me know, because I truly am creating this for you. So thank you so much for being here, for tuning into that first episode, and we will see you next time.